So a commenter mentioned, who's probably best to remain nameless, that Gary is poning me in some sense, which just means he's responding to me, which I don't know about him because I check my subscriptions box, and that's pretty much how I see your video. Even though I do click on people's names to get their account and their video list and see, have I missed something, because I could get a sense of how fast it scrolls and everything. That too is through my video box, right? Somebody comes up there and I'm like, hey, and I watch the video and I go, I wonder if I've missed any of their videos, and I click on it. So that's what that means to me. I mean, Gary may have some tool he makes to keep track of stuff or whatever. And I've seen him tell people, saw him tell Barklord, he's told me this, just go to the person's page, make a bookmark. I'm not going to make 10 bookmarks, right? It's not as convenient. Whatever. That's just the way it's going to be. So, it's got to be easy to see the stuff. You make it harder, then whatever. And probably it's just because, I am going to keep talking about life. And I went to Gary Stickham, and, he's all, I want you to admit this, and I was like a little bit shocked because we were talking about the convincing thing, and I was trying to tell Gary, can we just talk about some other subject, not every single thing? Because at this point, it's like every single thing comes down to life is meaningless, which sort of proves my point, because you try to talk about something you could do, but it's meaningless. And by the way, I'd like to talk about, I saw the modern mystics, like he's different from Gary, but he says life is futile. Gardening, I enjoy it, but it's futile. See, to me, and this is different from Gary's thing, the modern mystics point is like, this is really, really bothers me. More than Gary's, because he's talking about these pleasant things he's figured out, this Epicurean lifestyle, which I think is one of the successful formulas for a enjoyable life. You find out reasonable size, small, but pleasures, and you take joy in the intricate beauty of them. To say that you do that and go, but I have learned out that it's futile. See, to me, it's like, so there's a subjective world. He's admitting it has this value, but that's an illusion, and he lives by that. But there's the real world that he doesn't live by. So the real world is something he doesn't live by, and the unreal world is the one he lives by. No, the real world is the one you are valuing those things. And all it takes to see that is to compare with somebody somewhere in the world. Let's say they're in a slave-like or literally slave plantation kind of situation. They could see the value, how it wouldn't be futile, because they also think their life is futile. Geez, just picking these fucking tomatoes for this guy for nothing, and my kid is dying of typhoid. It's futile. Why am I doing this? He sees some guy that gets to garden and make YouTube videos and live in a nice, beautiful place, and the guy's going, yeah, it's futile. It's like, well, actually that would feel like great if I could do it for my own mental health and make myself more, self-actualized. No, it's still futile. Take it from me. And if Gary keeps arguing with me, I my whole philosophy is how to make life better, and the whole, and I've been trying to say, and I'm so glad Gary finally admitted this, is that it comes from hardship. The satisfaction for, and this is a Nietzschean idea. I don't want to plagiarize or anything. Though I think I have my own version of it. I think I had my own version of this before I happened to read Nietzsche's version. But, to say yes to life requires having a hardship, or else you don't really know. It's like when the super, super wealthy go, oh, money's the root of all evil, and it's really terrible, and they're saying this on the Riviera or whatever. just to be stereotypical. It's like they're right, but they're just exploiting a grain of truth. And, the real world is the way you live. The real world is the way you live. You can't pretend not to value the things you actually... But I've figured out that even though I behave like I care about, taking pictures of flowers, really I don't. Honest. No, I don't. It's kind of like I didn't want to steal the cookie. Well, but why'd you steal it? Well, I admit I stole it. It's just that I didn't want to steal it. Okay, well that would be a psychological problem. Is that the issue? You are the way that you're living. Okay, and your philosophy, it either matches the philosophy of that behavior, or else you've got two philosophies. And one of them is the behavioral one that has to be abstracted because you're not going to abstract it for us, I guess. And then the one that you advocate. Now, I say that all of us should tell people both philosophies. There's the philosophy of my behavior. I think eating meat tastes the experience. There's the philosophy of my ideals, which is that, well, I think ethically we're evolving away from meat. There's bioevolutionary defenses of it, yada yada. Defensivism of the behavior one there. But frankly, I think it's more ethical to go to a place where we don't. And it's not because I think it's entirely unethical. It's because I think there's no way to have ethical industrial farming, and there's no other way that we're really going to farm in the long run. And even farming in a sense, once you're going to have to do it on a large scale, there's a whole question about how you can do that even for plants, let alone animals, and maintain the health. Probably, I think, hopefully you pull it off with plants. If not, you do some sort of micro-farming thing. Now, could you do micro-ranching? No, even a small ranch is not really a great conditions for animals because they need more space than plants. So that still leaves that you could hunt, possibly. In other words, animals that live in a state of nature, as I mentioned before. But even that might just be hearkening to the fact that my real philosophy is rooted to my behavior. I admit that. But since I haven't come up with any ideal that really justifies that long term, I have this other thing. But you see how close together they are? It's not like life is futile, but I have a lot of lovely, nice things. No. Nick is an Epicurean. You want to know what he believes behaviorally? Read about Epicurus. Okay, not Epicurean, into foods. Modern meaning. Epicurus. Read. That's his philosophy. Okay, so it's like pessimistic rhetoric on top of that equals, futility and doomsday mentality. But Gary, back to Gary, I think he understands in a sense that I'll never give in. And I was surprised that he's like, it's interesting when I bring up this convincing stuff because, I have videos years old that I said exactly the same thing that come up in the related bar. So it's not a surprise, or it shouldn't be, but yeah, people are actually, how the hell could you watch any number of my videos and get the idea that there was any hope to convince? You're going to vince me. You're going to vince me. You're going to come up with your rhetorical swords and you're just going to pow, pow, pow me down, really. I mean, you must have that idea because I don't threaten you, but the reason I don't threaten you is because I'm not into that. I mean, it just, Gary's here. I put it in my video because I thought it was the part where I could say, look, Gary's good side, why people like Gary. There's angst. Should I make more well-produced video? And I'm kind of too lazy to do it, but also, I don't like that propagandizing. that Pyrrha was talking about in the video I'm responding to, which was bullshit. But only in my case, it's like, should I pwn more? No, of course not. Pwning is like a kid term for it. But I mean, I know the art of the flame war. The whole thing from that era of my online life is back, prior to 1987 or 8, before the internet, on text boards. So, and yet I've experienced this sort of thing throughout. I've gotten better at trolls and stuff, but I've taken it more like, I got out of that game. And, there were good things. It was good training for me, maybe. So, and then some people would say, oh, well, you do it. I saw one person, what did he say? Pyrrha's a troll when it suits his purposes. It was like, what? A backhanded compliment where somebody says something that literally could be taken as a compliment, but actually it's like, backhanded slap in the face. It's like the opposite. It's a front-handed insult, where they're going, here, let me shake your hand, front of my hand. Seemed like an insult, really a compliment. I mean, that's how you can survive. If you have none of that, it's like saying, I'm a pacifist. I don't want any fangs or claws or anything. And then now I'm going to go walk in the Amazon. Everything should love me because I'm so peaceful. It's like, that's not quite how nature is. And you can regulate things, and I'm all for that. I call that social infrastructure. But when they're not regulated yet, it's just the way it is, man. You better face facts. And there's an aspect of nature to it. But I think on some level, because if you look who and why Gary blocks, because we get along fine at Stickum, and I'll go in there, but I'm just not going to see his videos if they don't come up. If he doesn't unblock me, boom. If they don't come up. But I'll go into Stickum when I want to. It's great he does a regular room like that, so it's like year-round Saturday. I'm fine with that. I, over years, have pursued when he did block me to say, fuck that, I'm going to still say comment. But I comment on I don't really know if there are people that don't get it or whatever. New facts are coming up, but they're coming up at a slower rate than sort of the natural attrition of those arguments. Besides which, my engagement only helps them strengthen their rhetoric. And I'm fine with that. I want all people's rhetoric to be strengthened to the maximum degree, because what finally happens when that happens is it blows up, right? Because it gets pumped full of hot air, right? It's a different feeling when an idea is being refined down to its core, and finally it's just this core solid sphere, and that's that. It's a different feeling. And either way it's going, I might misdiagnose. Something might be getting down to its core. Now, with antinatalism, maybe there's a core inside this expanding balloon that's getting compressed at the same time. There's this kernel, which is what is useful enough for me. And as I express my thoughts on that, Gary in Stickum starts to see, and he sees them as admissions or whatever. Because I have admitted, again, for years, you could see, it's a personal detail, so it's an example of something, that I've, not expressed often or as far back in time as some things. But, there's a hormonal thing. You have kids because of your childhood ideas, especially, I had my kids at 27. A lot of my friends, they waited longer, so I seemed young, but I still think that's a good age for having kids. But I hooked up with the woman that I had them with at 18. So my idea of initiating a family right after my own childhood was because of my own childhood. And I'm sure this is why you see people having kids young when their own childhood is messy. It's not because they're taught bad values, it's because they want to fix what went wrong in their own childhood. So when you admit things like that, it's like, oh, so you did a mistake. Or like, what if you were 43, my year-old mind could go back, because he says, if you went back in time, And it's like, if your 43-year-old mind, I got him to be specific, went back in time, would you go through it again? Well, it was fucking a lot of hard stuff, man. Yeah, because I've met my kids. My 43-year-old mind has met my kids, and I would go through it for them to exist. The other thing that is funny for them is they're like, you're just selfish when you had kids. Well, I was Mr. Radical Man. Berkeley, going to Berkeley, living in Berkeley. I mean, the conservative campus, but the community very... And apartheid riots and People Park riots, chased by cops. I forget if I've ever told that, any of those stories. But, so anyway, so I was radically minded at the time. So and that's when I got in my relationship, and it was the whole idea, and I was still radically minded at 27. Okay. When I, wanted to have the children. And guess what? I did plan for them to change the world. That was my idea. And as they've grown up, I've realized, well, wait a second, even if it's a good idea, you can't tell them, force them, because I also had the idea of developing their own personalities, and it becomes clear, okay. And guess what? I think that I've developed people that are going to try to make the world better in the ways they think it could be better, which may or may not be the same as me. And that's the way that goes. And I'm happy with that result. If I knew that result was going to happen, I would go back and endure it. I'd try to do it better. I would try to do it better, And I've even thought about, you could consider still having those kids without having a relationship with that person. I mean, you're going back in time. I don't know what the limits are. Find somebody else, but it's the same kids, or find that person, but they're a different personality of them, or does it have to be the exact same ordeal? Okay, to get here, yeah. Of course, I don't believe that. I believe if you went back in time, you'd be able to make different decisions. Anything else is some sort of weird point. We're already back in time. This doesn't even make sense. Well, that's enough. I've rambled enough. Yeah, so if Gary wants responses, he has to unblock me so I can be subscribed to him, and I have to know he's unblocked me. And or he could just reply to my videos, and I'll see this. And sometimes I'll click on when he's replied to me, and I'll look at other videos or not.